My name is Zorn, and I have been keeping the peace on Nexus Station 14 for 16 cycles without losing a single fight, breaking a single protocol, or making a single assumption that came back to haunt me. Until the humans showed up. Let me paint you a picture of Nexus Station 14 before I get into the details, because context matters in this line of work. The station orbits a mid-tier gas giant in the Varith system, roughly equidistant from 4 major trade routes. That positioning makes it useful. Useful attracts commerce. Commerce attracts everyone else. We process somewhere between 30 and 50,000 transient visitors per standard rotation. Haulers, traders, diplomats, mercenaries, bounty collectors, and a rotating cast of individuals whose profession I prefer not to ask about directly. I am Viraki. If that species name means nothing to you, imagine something roughly 7 feet tall, dark-plated exoskeleton along the shoulders and spine, 4-fingered hands with retractable pressure claws, and eyes designed for low-light predator tracking. My homeworld has 3 apex species, and we are one of them, which means from birth, every Viraki is wired for threat assessment, aggression management, and the specific kind of patience that comes from knowing you are the most dangerous thing in most rooms. Station security suits me perfectly. I have worked alongside Grelin Breezers, Theka Enforcers, even a Durin former military officer named Cass, who could bend station-grade metal piping with her bare hands. I have seen real violence, real danger, real predators wearing the skin of civilized creatures. After 16 cycles, I thought I had a complete catalog of what dangerous actually looked like. Then the human trade delegation arrived and the entire catalog became worthless. The announcement came 3 weeks before their arrival. Earth, newly registered trade world, Class 7 designation, sending a diplomatic and commercial team to establish cargo contracts and resource exchange agreements. Standard stuff. My supervisor, a Grelin named Mock, sent the briefing to the whole security team with a note at the bottom that said simply, "Try not to let anyone step on them." That note got passed around the break room for 2 days. Everyone thought it was hilarious. When they actually docked, a small crowd of off-duty security personnel gathered near the arrival bay just to look. I am not proud of that. It was unprofessional. But I understood the curiosity because the humans were, by any reasonable galactic standard, remarkable only in how unremarkable they appeared. There were 12 of them, average height somewhere between 5 and 6 feet. Soft, pinkish skin with 0 natural armor. No visible defensive structures, no claws worth mentioning, no venom glands, nothing. They wore matching gray and blue uniforms with a circular insignia on the left chest that I later learned represented their planet viewed from space. They walked off the docking corridor in a loose group, looking around the station with wide, curious eyes. One of my colleagues, a Theka named Pole, leaned close to me and whispered with barely contained amusement, "They look like someone bred the threat response out of an entire species." I did not disagree. Most of the delegation were forgettable in the best possible way. They were polite, punctual, and completely non-disruptive, which put them ahead of about 60% of our regular visitors. They set up their trade office in Sector 4, filed all the correct permits, and got to work. Within a week, I had mentally filed them under low priority concern and moved on. But then there was Sarah Calloway. I first noticed her on my 3rd patrol of the commercial district, 3 days after the delegation arrived. She was standing in front of a Vicari food vendor, studying the menu display with intense concentration, while holding a small thermal flask. The vendor, a multi-limbed Vicari named Scritch, was doing that thing vendors do when they spot someone who looks like they will not buy much, that dismissive half-attention thing that says, "You are wasting both our time." Sarah did not seem to notice or care. She was entirely absorbed in reading the menu. She was small, even by human standards. The registration file listed her at 5 feet 3 inches and approximately 115 pounds. She had what I understood humans called dark brown skin, close-cropped natural hair, and sharp, attentive eyes that moved around a room in a way I recognized without being able to explain why. She was the delegation's logistics coordinator, which meant she spent a lot of time moving around the commercial and docking sectors, handling cargo paperwork and vendor negotiations. She was also, in the most complete and technically accurate sense of the phrase, the least physically threatening individual I had ever seen on this station. Her arms were thin, not athlete thin, just thin. When she gestured while talking, which she did frequently, you could see that her hands were small and her wrists narrow. She wore standard station-safe boots that looked 2 sizes too large for her feet. She had a habit of smiling at people who were clearly trying to be intimidating, which either meant she was naively oblivious or genuinely unbothered, and from everything I observed, it appeared to be the latter. I watched her talk down a Grellan dock worker who was blocking her cargo manifest review by sheer volume of his own voice. She did not raise her own voice. She just waited, nodded politely at specific intervals, and then very calmly explained the regulation he was violating in enough specific detail that he eventually backed down more out of confusion than respect. She walked away with her paperwork approved, sipping from that thermal flask. I found myself watching her more than protocol required, not because I was concerned about her safety, not exactly, more because there was something mildly puzzling about how completely at ease she seemed in an environment that should have read to any reasonable creature as dangerous. That ease should have told me something. I was not listening. Breck arrived at Nexus Station 14 about 2 weeks after the humans, and his arrival was the kind that made the whole security team quietly update their incident projection reports. Durin, 7 feet 9, roughly 460 pounds of dense, layered muscle over a reinforced skeletal frame. His species evolved in high-pressure ocean trenches, and the ones that came out walking on land did not do so by being gentle about it. He worked freelance enforcement, which is the polite way to say he got paid to hurt people and break things, and then left before legal consequences could catch up. He had been banned from 4 stations that I knew of. Nexus Station 14 had no grounds to refuse him entry yet was doing a lot of work in that sentence. Breck had a pattern. I had read enough incident reports from other stations to recognize it immediately. He would arrive, spend a few days establishing his presence in the Cantina circuit, pick out whoever looked most vulnerable, and systematically make their lives on the station miserable until they either paid him, left, or ended up in the medical bay. He never crossed the line into full criminal territory. He was precise about that, almost disciplined in how carefully he stayed just inside the boundaries of what security could act on. He was smart enough to be strategic and mean enough to enjoy it. The first time I saw Breck notice Sarah Calloway, I was standing near the entrance to the Broken Orbit, which is what passes for the station's premier social establishment. The name comes from the previous owner, who died under circumstances nobody has ever fully explained. Current owner is a Thranaki named Vosk, who keeps the lights low and the poor generous, and considers minor violence an acceptable overhead cost. Breck was at a corner table with 2 Grellan associates, all 3 of them deep into whatever they were drinking. Sarah walked past the entrance with her thermal flask and a data pad, heading somewhere with the focused walk of someone with a specific destination in mind. She was not even looking into the cantina. She was reading something on the pad while navigating the corridor with the automatic awareness of someone who had memorized the station's traffic patterns. Breck looked up from his drink. I watched his expression cycle through recognition, assessment, and then that particular quality of attention that I have learned to associate with something about to go very wrong. He said something to his companions. One of them glanced toward the corridor and shrugged. The other laughed. I was already on my comm unit. Zorn to dispatcher. Flag Breck, Durin Mail, Sector 7, the Broken Orbit vicinity. Possible escalation developing. Request secondary patrol assigned to human delegation members in commercial sector. The dispatcher came back. Secondary patrol en route. What is the threat level? I watched Breck settle back in his chair, still looking at the corridor where Sarah had been. Uncertain, I said. Elevated. Over the next 4 days, Breck watched Sarah the way a deep-water predator watches something moving on the surface. Patient, calculating, never obvious enough to justify intervention. He crossed paths with her twice in the commercial sector, and both times I was close enough to observe. He positioned himself in her path, forcing her to walk around him. He made comments in Duran that I partially understood, all of them contemptuous, all of them designed to provoke a reaction. Sarah gave him no reaction. She moved around him, filed her route adjustment without complaint, and continued with her day. Her expression each time was politely neutral in a way that seemed to frustrate Breck more than distress would have. I pulled her aside on the 4th day. "Miss Calloway, are you aware that Breck has been deliberately placing himself in your path?" She looked at me calmly. "Yes." "And you are not concerned?" She considered that for a moment. "I am aware," she said. "There is a difference." I did not know what to do with that answer, so I gave her the standard speech about reporting any threatening contact and moved on. The night had happened. The broken orbit was full. That familiar pressure cooker density of too many species, too many intoxicants, and too much accumulated tension from a long station rotation. I was near the entrance on routine presence patrol. Vosk gave me his usual nod from behind the bar. The music was loud, low frequency, the kind that you feel in your chest cavity more than hear. Sarah was at the bar with 2 colleagues. They had a small space carved out, not prime real estate, but enough. She had a glass of what the humans imported and called bourbon, and she was laughing at something her colleague said, head tilted back slightly, completely relaxed. Breck stood up from his table. The crowd parted for him automatically. It always does with something his size and reputation. He crossed the floor in about 12 long strides and stopped directly behind Sarah, close enough that she had to feel the displacement of air. The whole corner of the cantina went quiet. People near them took a casual but deliberate step back. This was a show, and everyone knew their role as audience. Sarah turned around. She looked up at Breck. I watched her assess him in the space of about 2 seconds, and what I saw on her face in that moment was not what I expected. It was not fear, which would have been reasonable. It was not bravado either, which would have been foolish. It was something closer to recognition, like she had solved a problem before it was fully presented. "Hey," she said in that calm way she had, "I do not think we have been formally introduced." Breck leaned down, close enough that it was deliberately invasive. "You are the Earth creature," he said in standard galactic, his accent thick. "The one that walks around my station like it owns something." "Your station," she repeated mildly. "That is interesting. I do not see your name on any of the registration paperwork." A ripple of something went through the watching crowd. Not quite laughter, more like the sharp intake that precedes an event. Breck's expression shifted. He straightened to his full height, and there was nothing subtle left in his face. He was done with the theater of intimidation and moving toward the part he actually enjoyed. "Let me show you," he said, "what small things get when they forget their place." His hand shot out, massive fingers closing around the collar of her uniform. His intention was obvious to everyone in the room. Lift her, dangle her, let everyone see what happened to creatures who did not show proper deference. It was an old power move, simple and brutal and effective. His hand closed on the fabric. And then Sarah Calloway moved. The room did not process it in real time. That is the only way I can describe what happened next. The human brain, and apparently the Vraki brain and every other brain in that cantina, needs a minimum threshold of time to convert visual input into comprehension. What Sarah did happened below that threshold. One frame, Breck's hand closing on her collar, his arm rising, his full body weight and momentum behind the lift. Next frame, Breck rotating horizontally through the air at a height no creature his size should reach without mechanical assistance. The table he hit was Vox's best one, solid composite construction rated for loads well beyond what a single body impact should manage. It did not survive. It came apart in a catastrophic implosion of material and scattered drinks in two Grelin traders who scrambled backward with a speed I had not known Grelins possessed. Breck hit the deck pleating with an impact I felt through the soles of my boots from 15 feet away. The sound was structural, the kind of sound that belongs in accident reports and insurance claims. Then, silence. Not the temporary silence of a crowd that has just heard something loud, the deeper silence of 200 beings simultaneously suspending all cognitive activity to process something that has violated the foundational assumptions of their observed reality. Sarah was standing in a low, stable stance, weight distributed, hands up and loose, looking down at Breck with the expression of someone who has completed a routine administrative task slightly ahead of schedule. There was no adrenaline in her face, no anger, no fear, no triumph. She looked, if anything, mildly inconvenienced. Breck moved, tried to move. His right arm, the one he had used to grab her, was producing visual information that I immediately categorized as severe structural compromise. The angle was wrong, the shape was wrong. The sound he made when he tried to push himself up was the kind of sound that bypasses cultural context and registers as a universal distress signal regardless of species. Sarah watched him for a moment. Then she spoke, and her voice was conversational in a way that made the moment surreal. "You had several opportunities to make a different choice," she said. "I want you to remember that." Breck got one knee under himself. His eyes found her face, and what I saw in them, in the face of a creature I had classified as one of the most dangerous individuals I had ever processed through this station, was raw fear. Not the performance of fear that bullies display when they want sympathy, the real kind, the kind that lives in the body. He opened his mouth, maybe to threaten, maybe to beg, probably both simultaneously given the specific quality of desperation in his expression. Sarah did not let him finish the sentence. Her right leg came up and around in a tight circular path that gathered momentum with mechanical efficiency, hip rotating to add the full torque of her core, and her boot connected with the left side of Breck's jaw at a velocity that the medical team would later spend considerable professional effort calculating. The sound was not like anything I had heard a living body make before. Breck's head snapped. 3 things flew from his mouth in separate directions, catching the cantina light before clattering across the deck plating. His body dropped with the specific quality of something that has had its central power source suddenly disconnected. No controlled descent, no attempts to catch itself, just immediate and total collapse. Sarah set her foot back down. She smoothed the front of her uniform with both hands. She walked to the bar, located her thermal flask where she had apparently placed it before the confrontation, checked the temperature, and took a long, measured sip. Then she looked across the cantina at me. "I apologize for the disruption," she said. "Send me the damage invoice and I will process it through delegation accounts." I had been in security for 16 cycles. I had seen things that required professional detachment to file reports about. I had seen creatures twice my size fold under force. I had seen violence that was artful, and violence that was just destruction, and violence that was somewhere in the middle. I thought I had a complete taxonomy. I had no category for what I had just watched. When I moved to Breck and confirmed he was breathing, I triggered the medical response. When I approached Sarah to take her statement, I put my hand on my restraint equipment out of protocol, not conviction. Standing next to her, she came up to approximately my shoulder height. Her hands, wrapped around the thermal flask, were smaller than my palm. Everything about her physical scale read as harmless in the most fundamental biological sense. And she had just destroyed a Durin enforcer who outweighed her by 345 pounds. At security headquarters, after she had given her statement, which was precise and complete and delivered without a single unnecessary word, I asked her directly, "How?" That is the entire question. Just how? She looked at me for a moment, and there was something in her expression that I think was her deciding how much to explain and in what terms. "My parents enrolled me in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu at age 5, she said. "I added Muay Thai at 8, wrestling at 12, and boxing at 15. I competed at a high level through university. I have been training for 23 years. She paused. On Earth, if you look the way I look, in the places I grew up, you learn early that waiting for size to protect you is not a functional survival strategy. Where you come from, I said carefully, is it always like this? She considered that. Most humans train something, she said. Not all at my level, but the instinct is there. We have had a very long time to figure out how to be effective despite being physically unimpressive. That phrase stayed with me, despite being physically unimpressive, as if she had fully accepted the premise and simply built her entire survival architecture around working past it. That night, I did what I should have done the week the humans arrived. I pulled Earth's full registration file and read every page of it. 219 pages. I read them all. By page 4, I had stopped feeling superior. By page 40, I was uncomfortable. By page 100, I was sitting very still, recataloging everything I thought I knew. Deathworld, category 12 of 12. I had to look up the designation because in 16 cycles, it had never come up. The database defined it as a planetary environment where cumulative environmental pressure, predator load, disease density, and biological competition creates lethality indexes that exceed galactic safety norms by a significant margin. Category 12 means the highest possible rating. It means that by the mathematical standards used to assess planetary danger, Earth is in a classification shared by only 7 other worlds in the explored galaxy, and 3 of those 7 are not currently inhabited by anything above microbial complexity. The other 4 either have no known civilizations or have civilizations that, as the database noted with characteristic understatement, appear to have adapted unusually thoroughly to hostile conditions. Earth's gravity registered at one standard: normal, comfortable. Except the report noted in academic language that one standard is at the high end of what most life-supporting worlds produce, and that species evolving under it develop correspondingly denser musculature and bone structure. The average human skeleton is measurably more robust than the galactic median for their body mass category. Their muscles operate at higher sustained efficiency. Their cardiovascular endurance exceeds most species of comparable size by margins that the report politely called surprising. The atmospheric oxygen content sat at 21%, flagged as elevated. High oxygen supports high-energy metabolisms. Humans process and convert energy at rates that allow sustained physical output in ways that their surface appearance does not predict. Then there was the predator catalog. I stopped reading that section in detail after the first 30 entries, not because it was unimportant, but because it was affecting my ability to continue reading calmly. Suffice to say that humans evolved on a planet populated by large, fast, intelligent predators with excellent sensory capabilities, and the humans survived that environment across hundreds of thousands of years, not by being the biggest or the fastest or the most armored, but by being relentlessly adaptive, cooperatively organized, and extraordinarily good at violence when violence became the available option. They also, the report noted, developed the unusual characteristic of being effective pursuit predators. Most species flee or fight. Humans can do both, and they can maintain a running pace for durations that exhaust creatures that are faster at sprint speeds. They hunt by simply not stopping. The report called this persistence predation and described it as rare in galactic ecology. The behavioral assessment section noted that humans have a documented neurological response to threat that can, in trained individuals, suppress the standard fear paralysis reaction and produce instead a focused analytical state optimized for tactical decision-making. The word for it in their language, the report noted, was flow state. It appeared most reliably in individuals with extensive physical training, like someone who had been training martial discipline since age 5, like someone who had looked up at a 460-pound Duran enforcer grabbing her collar and felt, apparently, something close to professional calm. I put the report down and stared at the wall of my office for a while. The next morning, I did informal interviews with 4 other members of the human delegation under the cover of routine security wellness checks. 3 of the 4 had trained in at least one combative discipline. One of them, a quiet man named Dr. Ellison, who handled cargo chemistry assessments, mentioned almost as an aside that he had competed in something called submission wrestling at a national level for 11 years before switching to the academic track. He said it the way you mention a hobby that you know is not particularly interesting to other people. Breck regained consciousness 18 hours after the incident. The medical team had managed the arm, the jaw, and the concussion, and the assessment was that he would need 3 reconstructive procedures before his jaw would function at anything approaching its previous capacity, and that the damage to certain nerve clusters meant there was a reasonable probability the repairs would be incomplete. He would, in the plain language of the attending physician, eat through assisted means for the foreseeable future, and possibly permanently. When I visited the medical bay for the incident documentation, Breck was awake but not mobile. The cervical stabilizer prevented most head movement. His eyes tracked me across the room. I had expected anger, the residual aggression of someone like him given cause to focus it. Instead, what I saw, still, was the fear. Not fresh fear, something worse. Fear that had settled in and made itself at home, the kind that recalibrates how a creature understands its position in the world. I did not say anything to him. There was nothing appropriate to say. In the corridor afterwards, his attending medic, a Kelrath named Pren, with whom I had a professional relationship of long standing, fell into step beside me. "The Durin," she said. "What about him?" "He asked me 3 times last night if the human female had been arrested."
She was cleared, self-defense, 60+ witnesses and full cantina security footage. Pren was quiet for a moment. "He does not understand it," she said. "He keeps trying to explain it to himself with the variables he has available, and it does not resolve. Something that small should not have been able to do what it did to him." "He had the wrong variables," I said. Back at the delegation sector, I found Sarah at her desk processing cargo manifests. Her thermal flask was beside her. There was no visible evidence on her person that the previous night had happened. She looked up when I entered. "Documentation complete?" she asked. "Cleared. No charges." She nodded and returned to her manifests. I stood in the doorway for a moment. "Miss Calloway, one question, off the record." She looked up again. "When he grabbed you," I said, "were you afraid?" She thought about it genuinely, not performing consideration, but actually checking the memory. "No," she said. "I was annoyed. I had given him multiple chances to walk away, and he did not take any of them. That is frustrating." She picked up her flask. "Fear would have been reasonable too, I just did not get there before the training took over." I thanked her and left. What I wrote in my official incident summary was thorough and accurate. What I wrote in my personal log that night was shorter. It said, "We watched them walk off the ship and saw small, soft, harmless creatures with no natural weapons and gentle manners, and we felt sorry for them. We thought the galaxy would be difficult for something so fragile. We never once considered that the galaxy might have something to learn from a species that came from where they came from and survived it long enough to find us. We were measuring the wrong things. All of us, the entire time." Breck was transferred to a medical facility 6 days later. The station processed his departure without ceremony. The human delegation stayed for 2 more months and completed their cargo contracts without further incident. Nobody grabbed any of them again. Not because of new regulations or increased patrol presence, because word travels fast on a station with 40,000 transient visitors, and the story of what happened in the broken orbit had reached every cantina and docking bay and cargo hold within 48 hours of the event. On the morning the human delegation departed, Sarah stopped me near the docking spoke to say goodbye. She shook my hand, which is a human farewell gesture involving brief contact that I have since learned to interpret correctly. Her grip, for the record, was firm in a way that registered as a statement rather than accident. Safe travels, Zorn, she said. Safe travels, I said. And then, because I could not help it, you should probably warn the next station as a courtesy. She smiled, that private joke expression she wore so often. I think they will figure it out, she said. She walked down the docking corridor and did not look back. I stood there for a moment, then returned to my patrol. There was a Grolin holler getting loud in Sector 3 and a cargo dispute developing near Spoke 9 and a full rotation of work ahead of me. The station kept running the way it always did, full of noise and commerce and bad decisions and the constant low-level friction of too many species in too small a space. But something had shifted in my understanding of the inventory, of what was dangerous and what was not, of what small and soft and harmless actually meant when it came from a planet that had spent 10,000 years trying to kill everything on it. The galaxy is full of creatures that look dangerous, armor and claws and venom and size, the obvious signals that evolution uses to say back away. We are trained from birth to read those signals. We built our whole security methodology around them. What Earth built was something different, something that carries no signal at all, something that smiles pleasantly and says please and thank you and files its paperwork on time and drinks coffee constantly and waits patiently for the moment someone mistakes patience for weakness.